A lot of times we want to repent after the deed instead of before the deed. And I myself certainly in former times have done that very thing. We want to do the deed because we understand that God's grace is on the other side of that deed. But I want you all to understand this, is that God's grace not only is on the other side of that deed, but it precedes that sinful deed as well. God's grace can keep you from as well as wash you from. Again, I want to say that God's grace can keep you from as well as wash you from. And what we learned in that is Cain really didn't deserve mercy. Because you have to remember something, is that when we sinned and his parents sinned against God, God could have wiped humankind out just like that and not even let us survive until the time of Noah and wipe all humankind out except for the 8. But what we found out is that God was merciful. And also in that lesson, we talked about the undeserved mercy, because the writer he said that he used this as example, the first example of God's mercy kind of, and I preceded that with telling you that there was an act of mercy before Cain was even born to Adam and Eve. Remember, I told you that Adam and Eve even received God's undeserved mercy through they couldn't even properly cover themselves. They covered themselves fig leaf, and God made them a coat of skins to cover them. So that was kind of the first act of grace. And even if we precede that, you could even say not wiping them out was the first act of grace. So there's some debate. There's certainly room for debate about what the first act of grace was, but it's irrelevant. All we need to know is that we receive God's undeserved mercy. And I want to leave you with that before we move on, is God's grace can precede the sin as well as cover the sin. Let us be a people that accept that grace that precedes the sin, because a lot of times, and there are people who've gone into situations of sin and weren't able to receive that grace on the other side of that sin, for that act anyway, because they got caught up and then their life was over. So again, let it precede the sin.